Muhammad was probably sincere. That does not make him a prophet. Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're looking at Ghalib Kamal's latest live stream titled Normal Insan or Nabi Mein Faraq. Like many of his live streams, it wasn't limited to one topic. Viewers asked questions about the historical Muhammad, the origins of Islam, culture versus religion, hadith, nationalism, consciousness, transgender issues, philosophy, and many other subjects. The discussion that interested me most came right at the beginning. What actually separates an ordinary human being from a prophet? Ghalib argued that there may not be any supernatural difference at all. He suggested that prophetic experiences could be explained through psychological or neurological causes rather than genuine communication with God. Interestingly, this is one place where I partially agree with him. Where I disagree is on his historical revisionism. Throughout the discussion, he argued for a sharp disconnect between the Muhammad of history and the Muhammad of Islamic tradition. Personally, I think that pushes the evidence too far. I think Muhammad almost certainly existed. I don't think we need elaborate conspiracy theories or wholesale reconstruction of early Islamic history to explain Islam. For me, the far more interesting question is this: what was actually happening inside Muhammad's mind? If we can answer that, many other questions begin to answer themselves. I think there are only three broad possibilities. The first is that Muhammad knowingly invented Islam. I've never found this explanation very convincing. Certainly there are verses that seem politically convenient. Certainly he accumulated power over time. Certainly later revelations often benefited him personally. But there are also moments that don't look like calculated deception. According to the Islamic tradition, before the Battle of Badr, Muhammad prayed desperately for victory. He reportedly pleaded with God that if his small community were destroyed, no one would remain to worship him. During battle, when the odds looked terrible, he reportedly declared, "I am the Prophet, this is no lie." Whether every narration is historically perfect is not really the point. The overall picture is of someone who genuinely expected God to intervene. That is not how I imagined a cynical fraud behaving. A fraud usually leaves himself an escape route. Muhammad often doubled down. That makes me think he probably believed what he was saying, so I assign very little probability to deliberate deception. The second possibility is the traditional Islamic explanation. God really spoke to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel. As an ex-Muslim atheist, I don't find that explanation persuasive, not because it is impossible, because I don't think the evidence requires it. Whenever we are faced with extraordinary claims, the first question should be, can ordinary human processes explain what we're observing? If they can, then invoking the supernatural becomes unnecessary, and that brings us to the third possibility. Muhammad was sincere, but sincerely mistaken. Human beings are extraordinary creatures. Throughout history, people have reported hearing God's voice. Others have claimed to speak with angels. Some believe deceased relatives visit them. Others experience prophetic dreams, visions, mystical encounters, or profound spiritual certainty. Most of these people are not consciously lying. They genuinely experience something. The real question is not whether the experience feels real. The real question is where the experience comes from God, or from the human mind. Modern psychology and neuroscience tells us something very important. The brain is capable of generating experiences that feel completely external. Creative people often describe ideas as arriving fully formed. Writers say characters begin speaking to them. Musicians say melodies simply appear. Scientists report solutions coming suddenly after years of struggling with a problem. The subconscious mind is far more powerful than we usually appreciate. If creativity can feel external, why could not religious inspiration? Muhammad spent years reflecting on religion. He withdrew into the cave of Hira. He lived in a society filled with stories about Abraham, Moses, Jesus, angels, judgment, and revelation. If he began experiencing profound, altered states of consciousness, why would he interpret them as anything other than communication with God? That seems entirely understandable. It does not require dishonesty. It does not require divine intervention. It only requires a deeply religious human being trying to make sense of extraordinary internal experiences. Now, someone might object. If Muhammad wasn't receiving revelation, how do you explain the Qur'an? I think that's an excellent question. The Quran is one of the most influential books in history. Its Arabic has been admired for 14 centuries. Even many non-Muslim scholars acknowledge its literary power. But here's why I think Muslims make a logical leap. Suppose I granted every one of those points. Suppose I agreed that the Quran is a masterpiece. What follows? Only one thing. Muhammad produced an extraordinary religious text. That's all. It does not logically follow that God dictated it. History is full of extraordinary human achievements, brilliant composers, great philosophers, remarkable mathematicians, revolutionary scientists. Human beings occasionally produce works that change civilization. We don't conclude that every extraordinary achievement must therefore be supernatural, so why should we make that leap only for the Quran? Muhammad wasn't known primarily as a poet before his prophetic career, but the Quran wasn't produced in a single afternoon. According to Islamic tradition, it emerged gradually, over approximately 23 years. It was delivered in an oral culture where memory was highly developed. Muhammad spent decades immersed in religious questions. None of this proves he composed the Quran entirely from ordinary human creativity, but it certainly shows that a natural explanation is conceivable. And once a natural explanation is conceivable, divine intervention is no longer the only option. Notice something interesting. The discussion really isn't about Muhammad, it's about evidence. Suppose Muhammad was completely sincere. Suppose the Quran is one of the greatest literary achievements in human history. Suppose millions of people have transformed their lives through Islam. Wonderful. None of those things demonstrate that Islam is true. They demonstrate that Islam is influential. Those are two very different claims. As someone evaluating religions from the outside, I'm not asking whether Muhammad was extraordinary. I think he was. I'm asking whether his extraordinary life establishes that an all-powerful God spoke to him. And I don't think it does. This is where I ultimately part ways with Ghalib Kamal. He often focuses on reconstructing a radically different historical Muhammad. I don't think that's necessary. I think the traditional picture already contains enough information to reach a natural explanation. Muhammad may well have existed. He may well have believed every revelation he proclaimed. He may sincerely have thought that Gabriel was speaking to him. But sincerity is not the same thing as truth. The history of humanity is filled with sincere people who were mistaken. Muhammad could simply be one of them. And for me, that remains the single most plausible explanation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.